All right, we're live. All right, thanks everyone for joining today. Here we are with Getting to Hell Yes with Mark Fiebig from PayScore. Now, reminder everybody listening in here. So, Getting to Hell Yes. One of the things we're trying to dig in on is this kind of the change in the buyer's journey. For years and years and years, sellers are out there persuading everyone. It had a bad name to it, but really, one of the things that we're finding in the world today is that the buyers have a tremendous amount of power. And they know more than ever before. They a lot of times know more about our competitors than we might. And so the whole point of Getting to Yes is finding buyers that are looking to solve a problem. And they've articulated that problem. They know about that problem, but they may not know all the solutions out there. And so one of the things we're out there talking about and Getting to Yes is trying to find the buyers that are, they've articulated their problem enough. They know it, they're looking for it, and they're following the modern buyer's journey. And one of the things that we're always seeking in the Getting to Yes conversation is what's going on in their life, what's forcing them to change, what kind of time wall are they facing so that they, whereas they need to change. So today we got Mark from PayScore. And with that intro, Mark, if you could just give us a little bit about your background and then how'd you end up in this role? And then ultimately we'll get into who's your ideal Hell Yes buyer.
That sounds great. I appreciate it, Guillermo. Excuse me. Yeah, the thing that brings me to the table with PayScore is having started a handful of other companies, other technology companies. Started a wireless phone company over in Europe, came back to Seattle, started a BizOps software solution to automotive dealerships, and we sold that company. Started a couple of companies in healthcare and healthcare adjacent spaces. Those didn't quite get the uptake in one case, so we killed it. The other one, we were up against a patent fight that we knew we couldn't afford, so we put that baby on ice, and maybe after PayScore's exit, we can reconstitute that one. So it's a really good opportunity. That's for another conversation. But I came into starting this company, PayScore, by virtue of having consulted to a commercial property outfit that was managing assets, commercial assets, on behalf of their tenants in common or their pro rata shareholders in office buildings, industrial parks, medical, dental facilities, that sort of thing. And help them kind of get their leadership team in order. We brought the property management discipline in-house. That was a fee they were giving away, which was a head scratcher to me because it's a nice tidy 5% fee, especially when at that time they had 1 million square feet under management. We grew that to about 2 million square feet under management. About my 15 months of engagement, I brought the property management discipline in-house. About the same time, the wife and I started getting investment properties for our own purposes. And now, guess who? Yours truly is the expert in property management. So I'm managing our assets. And I very quickly came to see that there were a lot of inefficiencies in the daily activities of the property manager, and kept zeroing in on one specific slice of that set of daily activities. It was really kind of two slices that I think of that are the most broken. One of them is managing the maintenance or work order process, trying to coordinate and orchestrate the actions of vendors related to fixing repairs or addressing maintenance items. Not going to touch that one. Leave that to others who are a lot smarter than I am.
We'll take that for you.
And the other big broken piece was trying to verify somebody's income. Historically, the problem has been for property managers, how do I know how much my potential future occupant makes? Can they afford to meet their monthly rent obligation? And the way they've been trying to solve for that problem, literally for generations now, is by looking at pay stubs and looking at bank statements, which in the early days, kind of pre-internet, you'd show up for your apartment tour with your pay stubs printed out, maybe your bank statements in tow, and you just hand over a copy of those along with your paper application that you filled out on a clipboard after you took a tour of the property. Well, fast forward 20 years, there's this thing called the internet. And so in so many ways, it's an incredibly valuable tool for so many reasons, but it also facilitates opportunities for nefarious behavior, particularly in today's day and age with the advent of AI-generated imagery. It literally takes 2-3 minutes to conjure up an entirely convincing version of a pay stub or a bank statement for that matter. So now I, as a property manager, am requesting that information of my potential future occupant. I get a pay stub, I get a bank statement from them. I have absolutely no idea whether that document is valid. No idea. There's no way for me to know. So PayScore has taken an entirely different approach. It's data first. We look at the source data of the prospect to understand their deposit history and provide a measure of income stability to the landlord. So they've got now a defensible decision-making model to truly understand the capacity of that individual or that household to meet their monthly rent obligations. It's an entirely different point of view, different perspective. Doesn't rely on trying to guess whether a document's falsified or using enhanced optical character recognition and enhanced OCR to try to find some flaw or differentiation and, from one sentence to the next or font type and this sort of thing, whether the document's been modified. That's a game of whack-a-mole. And I'll tell you, anyone who's trying to verify a document using enhanced OCR that they're now curiously, magically calling AI for some reason. It's not AI. Excuse me. It's a fool's game. It's a game of whack-a-mole. You can do a Google search or a Bing search and ask for make fake pay stub free online. You get at least 500,000 hits on that query, maybe 3.5 million hits on that query. So you're fighting against a hive mind who's always going to be one step ahead of you in terms of conjuring up a more convincing document. So we just avoid together.
Even if you took an existing pay stub, you just put it in Canva, you can just change it. Like, it's not that hard.
No, it's really, really easy. And there are services you can pay somebody $20 to do it for you.
Yeah.
And, they'll guarantee approval. And that's one of the things that's been really kind of fun and gratifying is to see, the folks on TikTok, folks on Reddit, giving counsel, giving advice about how to overcome these systems. And invariably they'll say, well, if your landlord's using PayScore, move down the street.
Really?
Yeah, you're not gonna be able to beat that system. But if they're using one of these, click on the link and we'll show you how. Yeah.
Wow. Do you find like when you take a look at these people trying to do this, these are obviously undesirable renters, right?
Yeah.
You want to have them begin with. This is how they're opening the game up, and then the rental fraud happening. Like, do you find that there's a rental fraud, like not just the not paying your lease, but is there other compounding events that emerge that are other costs that need to be that operators or property management companies need to be aware of?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of time spent trying to figure out how to treat an occupant that may have moved in under false pretenses.
Mm-hmm.
There's this whole recovery collection cycle. There's an eviction process that varies jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So let's say your portfolio spans cities, counties, states.
Right.
There's over 39,000 jurisdictions in the United States. You got to be a legal expert in the eviction proceedings in each and every one of those jurisdictions. Well, guess what? You have to be if you're moving in these tenants on false pretense. Another scary thing that we see happening now is it isn't just at the lower end of the rent range. You see this in premier properties as well. Penthouse suites, people know they can beat the system. They move in, provide this documentation that says, they're making $400K a year. They just move in, don't pay rent because they know they can get away with it. They know they can get away with it. And another scary thing that's happening is once you finally get them out to vacate the premises, they're taking the appliances and rolling up the carpet and leaving.
Yeah, that's the part that I was expecting, right? They're not just moving out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If they like the blinds, they'll take those along, but they're at least taking the appliances because they can, sell them on Craigslist for $800 or something. I don't know what to do with them. Move them into the house if they start squatting in.
Is it especially vulnerable? I mean, obviously right now there's a ton of conversation on centralization. Leasing is where things started in a centralization perspective because it makes a lot of sense. Or maybe property admin and then leasing, or maybe general admin. But when we take a look at like the potential for fraud, is it more likely when you've got a decentralized system versus a centralized system?
I really don't think so because it's a function of the information you're using to underwrite that applicant, whether that's a centralized compliance team or if it's still the leasing agent on site.
Yeah.
You're still relying on someone to look at information. And so the real question is the information they're relying on valid and of use? Mm-hmm. If it's an applicant shared document, probably not. Probably not. PayScore is reporting income stability directly from the source. It's the deposit history from their bank account. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about whether the data is valid. It is source data. Either the money landed in their deposit account or it did not.
Right. Gotcha. So when you're taking a look at, so with that as context, when you're looking at hell yes, there's 44 million rentals in the US right now, units. You're talking to property managers. There's 5 property managers to talk to. You've got 1 hour to talk to. Who are you choosing?
Well, the belly of the beast, really, if you kind of zoom out and look at the composition of this market, who's running or operating those 44, 45 million units. Everybody likes to talk about the NMHC top 100.
Yep.
That's something like plus or minus 5% of the unit count, right?
It's crazy. The tail on it is huge, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Like
yeah.
They start at $1 million. I think assets at like 3.5, 350, maybe RPMs there too. I can't remember. And then it just like starts getting really small, really fast. And then it's like, like I think it tails out at like 15,000 and then 10,000. It's an 80-20 thing.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And that's great news for us, right? That just means there are even more folks, frankly, who have less opportunity prospectively to allocate resources to digital migration.
Right.
If I'm a portfolio operator of 10,000 units and there's 8 people on my team, we're scrambling, man. We are hustling.
Yeah. What I like to say that the economic buyer, if you're familiar with that term, or the person who's authority over discretionary spend, and the pain are often in the same seat, right? Where when they're separate seats, now one's going to convince the other. But if you're, 10,000 units, the person who's actually got authority to spend and the person who's feeling the pain is the same person.
Yeah. Yeah. We're a lot closer to that front line. 100%. Yeah. And that's one of the things I'll be candid about is the challenge in this space, in this segment is, let's think of this 10 or 20,000 unit portfolio, that group of operators inside of that organization, if it's 8 or if it's 28 people, it can be a different seat in that organization that is making the decision about this digital migration.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a case of a pure traditional enterprise software sale where you're going after every company's sysadmin or every company's COO.
Yes.
Or every company, fill in the blank, right? Where it's the same target inside every company. Not the case here. So that there's some friction there for us in sales cycle on the front end and identifying who within that organization is the buyer, right? Who's taking the reins or who's owning that responsibility. Once we latch onto that person, I'll tell you, there's no mystery around whether they could benefit from what PayScore has to offer. That's one of the things that's been really fun and exciting about building this business is never in my life. And, I laid out a history of having disease around starting companies. Never in my life have I experienced sales calls like we have with PayScore. We just had another one of these last week on Thursday. One of our sales team was in a call, first conversation with a prospect. And by the end of an hour conversation, they had already submitted their onboarding information and we were scheduling a training call.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, I've trained people in the first 30-minute conversation I've ever, so like they're on board. Their team of 3 people who conduct screening is on board by the end of our first 30-minute call.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
That's a dream.
So it's great. Yeah. So they know they have this problem. I mean, even some of the big companies, top 5 companies are still looking at pay stubs. They haven't quite gotten their heads around how to solve this problem yet. It's fascinating.
So, and then to keep track of the conversation. So, the buyer out there is like your preferred buyer is someone that's 10,000 units under management. Like they're the ones that choose fastest. I'll put it that way.
Right.
And of course,
yes.
Everyone would love to have the biggest and the baddest, but ultimately we have to choose ones that buy fastest. Right.
Yep.
And the problem you solve for them is income verification. And that solves a problem around bad debts that smooths out. I mean, and ultimately I would imagine it's a leading indicator of a good renter, right? If someone's got bad, I mean, I'll put it this way. Maybe someone has negative pay score or negative demonstration ability to pay. That's just going to be a leading indicator of some sort of indication of problems down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you what, a big part of the puzzle, there's been kind of this, kind of triangulate as a property manager, try to make a decision. You talk to their current landlord, you look at their pay stubs, you look at their credit score, and then you kind of lean back and go, yeah, Guillermo seemed like a good dude, and I gave him materials, go for it. We'll take a flyer, right? A little bit of that seat of the pants. We've actually had customers tell us now they've canceled their service for credit screening. They're like, we don't care. We just want to see how much money they have in the bank. And if that's a factor greater than their rent, that is their business threshold, they can set their threshold for us to tell them, yep, your applicant is above or below the threshold. Now they know. It's like, yeah, the money's there. You're good. Let's do it. Let's sign a lease.
How do you find, and so like there's a lot of hand wringing for the right reasons over fair housing, right? And I hear a lot, and it's funny because like I hear a lot from a maintenance perspective around, maintenance is a problem, and it's not leading. It's not leading the headlines. It's certainly see it on the leasing side of things. How does PayScore? I don't want to lead the answer here. How does PayScore affect fair housing?
Well,
the fair housing man.
Sure. Yeah. How do you stay compliant with fair housing if you're using PayScore services? Well, one of the cool things about PayScore is that we actually increase the odds of the prospect being treated more closely aligned with the fair housing tenants.
Mm-hmm.
Guillermo, you'd say, well, how can that be, Mark? Tell me more.
Right, exactly.
So one of the cool things about PayScore is that if you are someone with a side hustle, maybe you got 2 side hustles, right? You may not have W-2 income at all. Maybe you've got 3, what traditional earners would think of as side hustles. PayScore can report that income, whether it's coming from, PayPal, Square, Google Wallet, like wherever the money's coming in from, we can report that. And so now if I'm a non-traditional earner, by the way, 45% of us have a side hustle in the United States, 45%. Another 45%, they're thinking about starting one in the next couple of weeks. Money's coming from everywhere. So as an occupant, a potential future occupant, I want to be able to put my best foot forward. And as a landlord, do I care where the money's coming from? I mean, within legal confines.
Sure.
Right? Do I care where the money's coming from? No, I just want to make sure you can pay the rent. So show me your income stability. Show me your earnings history. If I can see that, PayScore's report, you can. So now from the standpoint of, zooming back out to your original question, how does fair housing come into play here? We're helping property managers be more compliant with fair housing because they are giving their applicants the opportunity to fully represent their earning power. Totally shifts the dynamic. And we get feedback from the applicants as well as from our customers all the time. You got to stay close to your user. We get feedback from applicants telling us, man, this is great. It's the first time I didn't have to go landlord shopping in order to be able to tell my income story. Or, I've been a bartender for 15 years. First time I got the apartment on the first try because I could illustrate, I could defend how much money I make.
Gotcha.
The fastest I've ever been approved. I got 3 jobs and trying to hold it together. And I did this on my phone, driving from one job to the next job.
Do you, much like credit reporting, like do you offer, like is a prospective renter ever able to go into PayScore ahead of time before they like get pre-approved sort of thing?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we started the biz, we went direct to consumer.
Okay.
We had no name recognition. So the landlords would say to the applicants, man, you went to a lot of trouble to make a really pretty report. Now send me your pay stubs. So we had to step back and think, okay, well, wait a minute. We need some brand recognition before we can go direct to the consumer. So, maybe that's in the future for us in some future phase. But we said, okay, wait a minute. We need to go to the landlord, make this service available to them so that they can get the information they need to make well-informed decisions. And we find, coming back to the fair housing thing, we find a number of our customers, particularly the larger enterprise accounts, they will set the use of PayScore as a requirement. It's a mandate. They say right in their application criteria, if you want to be considered an applicant for any of our communities, you have to go through this process.
Gotcha. So like framing it back to the buyer side of things, person who's having the problem, what are they going to Google? Let's assume, like, let's go with the model that people search before they discover.
Sure.
And they typically search in a search engine. What would they be typing into Google before they find you?
Sure. Income verification. How do I verify an applicant's income?
Mm-hmm.
And it's messy because there's a lot of competition for that response from the guys and gals who are conjuring up fake pay stubs.
Oh, right.
A lot of overlap there.
Yeah. And those are just AdWords.
Yeah. Oh,
so interesting.
A lot of competition there for mind share.
So how do you separate yourself from the mix in that, like in those results?
Yeah. Well, algorithms are a beautiful thing, right? You just iterate, optimize, iterate, optimize, iterate, optimize, right? We have, excuse me, we have on our team the marketing brain power that did this work for Bing search, Microsoft's Bing search.
Yeah.
Running thousands and thousands and thousands of iteration of word choice, word placement, image placement to iterate and optimize. And so we're always running in the background. How do we organize thought so that people who are looking for our service most easily find it, and the message that they see and they hear resonates with the actual problem that they're living daily.
And the nice thing about your query is that there's enough people looking for that query, probably on both sides of it, that it creates enough data that you can actually can sort through all the results. So your buyer, when they've done the Google search, they've seen their alternatives out there. Like, what makes and why do they choose? Like, why do they decide to change now? What's their time wall?
Sure, there's a couple things going on. I mean, if you look at a NMHC survey last year, I think it's 93% of all property managers facing fraud in their daily activities. It's just obscene, right?
Yeah.
So they're hard up against that. We're seeing now with the cost of money having doubled, right? There's downward pressure on rent rate growth. And so it's time to focus on operating margins.
Mm-hmm.
How do you eliminate bad debt? How do you reduce bad debt? Well, you don't let bad debtors occupy your communities in the first place. Okay, we got to get a handle on this fraud situation, right? We can't have 3 people on the team putting on their green visors, pulling their chairs over in a corner and studying a single pay stub, try to figure out if it's any good.
Yeah.
Okay? So take that out of the equation entirely. And so, by reducing maybe from 2 weeks of stop-start, 10 daily disruptions, trying to collect somebody's pay stub, you can get it done in 10 minutes, right? And it's defensible data, it's source data.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing that we're seing from a maintenance side of things is that the defensibility piece, like, it's a real thing, like, especially with the cost of money, with I'll say, like, not only are property investors being squeezed, but the renters are being squeezed as well right now.
Yeah.
And so they, if there is a situation where there is an unfortunate eviction, then all of a sudden all the lawsuits can start flying, and there's ambulance chasers seeking people that are looking to, get blood out of the landlords. And so, or the owners. And so it's an interesting, it's a very dynamic world right now where the rules are being reset with how this whole experience happens. So, like, when you take a look at the legacy kind of like leasing approach, like, how do you sort? Like, if you're going to go filter, how do you sort within those that are seeking to find a resolution versus those that are probably not going to do anything?
Sure. Yeah. Really, the only way to find that out is through conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, you can study and scrub and investigate and analyze anything you can find on the internet about a property management company, but it doesn't mean anything until you talk to somebody.
How do you guys get those? What systems do you guys use to find those prospects?
Sure. I mean, it's not altogether that difficult to. I mean, there are a number of providers of that information, right? It's also attending the industry trade shows, the traditional predictable trade shows.
Yeah.
You always get an attendee roster from those trade shows, so you get contact information in that way. And we also have been very diligent in our building our sales team with folks who have direct industry experience, and they're bringing for those of us in the room who are old enough, they're bringing their Rolodex, right? Their network of contacts developed over their career arc to bear when they're calling on accounts. These are accounts they've sold to or maybe worked inside of in the past, right? So it's kind of a combination of events. Gotcha.
And do you? I mean, I'm feeling the same thing, right? With respect to our business. Like, we're looking to make a name for ourselves, and in the luckily for us, there's a lot of people talking about centralization, a lot of people talking about maintenance. We don't have to invent a story; the story already exists, right? Yeah. And we kind of follow on that, and that's been good. But there's still, I think, even for what we sell, there's a leading curve of conversation before there's actually conviction around buying, And so there's still a bit of that needs to be solved. But by and large, like the more conversations we have, there's everybody who's like either like I think we're seeing that people already have it in budget, or they're thinking about it, or at least they've got people mobilizing around it, or they're experimenting about it. And so often I ask the question, like, what have you tried? Right. And so do you get that kind of question? Like, how does that land?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, similarly, everybody knows they have a problem, right? This is how we've closed deals in the first call. I've onboarded new accounts instead of the 30-minute call, first contact. Just happening last week when our sales team did that in an hour, right? First contact, onboarded the team inside of an hour. They know they have a problem. You call them and say, hey, how do you verify income? And they're like, oh man, it's a disaster. Let me tell you.
Right.
Like, okay, great. So we got a better mousetrap. Can I show you? You got 5 minutes? Show them the demo. Like, wow, this is amazing. How do I start using it? You got 10 more minutes? Okay. They're onboarded.
That's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And so, yeah, like you say, there's no trying to define or convince them they have a problem. There's no, like, no, trust me. I know you guys are struggling in this little piece of your sandbox. No, man. Everybody knows fraud's a huge issue. And they know they're struggling to address it. And when we can tell stories of our customers calling us to celebrate having reduced their bad debt from 600K to 30K inside of 6 months,
wow,
that gets people's attention. When we can say, our customer success team was talking to one of our customers and they said, look, I would quit if my boss walked in right now and said, we're pulling the plug on PayScore. I'd stand up, hand over my keys, hand over my badge, and walk out. I quit on the spot. We're like, whoa, wait a minute. That's pretty hot. Why? Tell us more. So look, we've been using PayScore for 18 months. Our delinquency rate is 0%. Any questions? I need you guys. 0% delinquency, right? We had somebody else make PayScore a condition of employment. They were being recruited away to a new property management company.
Yeah.
And she told our team, hey, guess what? I'm being recruited. I think I'm going to take the job. But I told them I'd only take it if they onboard with you guys, because I can't live without PayScore.
That's outstanding.
Yeah. So when we can tell these stories to potential customers, it perks their ears, to say the least.
Bad debt's kind of a sneaky cost because it sits as a liability or as a receivable for a while, right? It kind of like festers and manifests. And then ultimately you've got to kind of realize at some point in time, you've got to go and pull the trigger on it, right? And either it's a year end or it's a time duration at the unit level or whatever it is.
Yep.
While it would seem extremely obvious that this is something that you want to prevent on day zero, given that it sits there on the balance sheet as something that you're kind of accruing, how it is, because like in many cases, like you would recognize that revenue for that month, it just goes into receivable and then it doesn't get paid. And so then it slides into bad debt. That could be 3 months. That could be 6 months before that happens.
Yeah.
Is it the case that you're talking to people that have already felt that pain and they've already kind of like, they're at a point where they got to write off bad debt? Or is it they have a line of sight to what might happen if they don't solve the problem?
Well, it's a little bit of a mix. One of the points of objection we'll get is, look, I've been in this business for 30 years. It's working.
Yeah.
I got the nice car. I got a big boat, and my business is running. Bad debt is just part of the cost of running business. So we do run into those folks who are still not interested in having that extra $570,000 in their pocket for some reason. That'll get you a pretty nice boat, at least a down payment on a really nice boat.
Yeah.
And so it's helping them see that, embrace the small amount of time it takes to make this shift. And our customers tell us their teams are doing their work twice as fast now. So it isn't just eliminating the bad debt, it's also reducing an allocation of resources to dead end activities.
Yeah.
Productivity gain there as well. So it's kind of a backward way of answering your question, but I think that counterpoint sort of spells out what we run into and what gives them compunction about making a change. It's these downward pressures of some macro trends right now that are shifting how people are thinking about it. Rent rate growth is stable, not really going up. I mean, there was 10, 15 years of free money. Yeah, we just raised rents 5 to 8% every year. Yeah. Life is good, right? So that just ended. Now they're having to get back to professional management. And so they're really zeroing in on, and they're getting pressure from the owners too, right? Because the owners have grown accustomed. They may only have been in the ownership cycle during that period of annual rent increases. And now they're like, what do you mean the rent's not going up? What are you talking about?
Well, then presumably for a fee manager, right? Like, and this kind of leads to the next question of who do you sell to, the operator or the owner? And the owner wants the cash in, but the fee manager, in many cases, they get paid on collected revenue, collected rent.
Right.
They're not going to get paid. They're very motivated to activate something to defend against that. Because, like, you imagine it, you're a regional, you've made a forecast of what your revenue looks like. You've included revenue that's going to look like that eventually becomes uncollectible. And then you go and you find out after you've reported rent levels to the owners that rent wasn't going to be collected. And then now, and I can just see that the hands are pointing everywhere, right? Because the hands are pointing for their leadership that they've just reported on a revenue forecast that this isn't going to be hit because there's going to be some deductions there. And they've reported back to their investors, the owners, sorry, that they're going to be, that rent is going to be there. And that's not there. This is two really uncomfortable conversations that the regional's got to have, right?
Right. Yeah. And so to kind of illustrate the success that we have in that regard, there's a regional, I won't name the company, but it's one of the top three. We'll just put it at that, big operator. And so the owners, they don't put all their eggs in one basket. They hire 2, 3, maybe 4 third-party managers. So a similar case where, this PMC had a segment of the portfolio, and she went to her owner and said, look, I know we're never going to manage your entire portfolio, but you've seen the numbers we're putting up with PayScore. You guys should be using PayScore across your whole portfolio. Do you want an introduction? So we have our customers selling into their customers our services. And so that regional has the foresight to think about not wanting to have those uncomfortable conversations that you're talking about.
Yep.
I don't want to live through that. I don't want to live through that. It's not fun. It is an uncomfortable conversation. And so what can I do to prevent it? Oh, that's right. PayScore is preventing me from having to have those conversations. So, let's spread the word.
So, I mean, it feels like a slam dunk, right? But it is, but it's not, or sales just isn't. I wish it should be, right? So, like you mentioned the objection about I've been in the business forever and ever. What other objections do you hear?
Sure. Another objection is, now PayScore has been at this for a little over 7 years now. So we've been taking arrows in the back. We're, best in class provider in this dominion, but we've seen over the last 2-3 years, other people jumping into our sandbox and reaching for our bucket and, the pail and the shovel. And so now one of the things that we run into is we'll be in a prospect dialogue and they say, well, we're going to run a side-by-side. Mm-hmm. Which is great. We're perfectly happy to have that bake off, see who gets the blue ribbon because we know we outperform everybody else that's out there. But it lengthens the sales cycle, right? It takes longer to close a deal now because they want to run side-by-side pilots for 3 months. And so that's one of the objections that we now face. So that's a new obstacle or a new hurdle for us over the last 18 months to 2 years. So, you got to shift and adjust to that accordingly. And we welcome it. We love having competition now. Instead of having to educate people about what we do, it's educating how we're different than the other person that you spoke with.
Yep.
And we're happy to do that all day long.
Yeah, we do the similar. We have similar conversations where it's like it's easier for someone to understand conceptually what you do if they've heard about it before from somebody else. Right. And it is important that despite that it may seem obvious to folks that are out there in the buyer community, but we do actually encourage the voice of all of our competitors because the more people are talking about centralized maintenance, the more comfortable buyers are. The more people are moving along that curve from early adopters into kind of the early majority, where they understand what it means and they frame their own definition for it all, and they start to kind of understand what they have something to type into Google, right? Like and the second that someone starts typing into Google the problem that you solve, then and before they've met you, then your audience is already validated. Like they're already vetted. They're already seeking alternatives and they're moving themselves down the buyer's journey. Right.
Yeah.
Any stories like when you're having the conversation to be able to filter out who's ready to buy and who's not ready to buy? What kind of what's your question flow? Like when you bring on a new AE and there's a question that you must ask, what's that question look like and what's it feel like?
Sure. It's fairly basic stuff, right? Who owns the budget, right? Who has responsibility for this buy decision? You got to understand that. And if that's not the person that we're talking to, then we need to get in contact with that person as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that honestly, that's the biggie. The things that we like to learn about is um, how much time are they spending trying to combat fraud today? How many people on the team? That's their sole set of responsibilities, is trying to deal with fraud. Is it 2 people or is it 12 people in the team? And what if we could reduce that 2 and 12 to 1 or 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's real cash money. So you start to lay out the economic proposition here, the benefits, the identifiable financial reward from using our service that resonates with people. So you got to get them in dialogue around those things, those points of pressure. There may not be pain, but at least pressure, so that you can uncover how to listen,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what to listen to. You know, when we started the biz, we put a stake in the ground and said, we're doing this to make lives easier for people. That's our operating thesis. And so that every question that we ask, every potential feature add to our platform, our commercial paper for agreements with our customers and partners, how can we make your life easier? So that informs the dialogue, informs the conversations we have with potential customers. You know, I know you're struggling in these ways. Can I show you how to make your life easier? I'd like you to be more satisfied with the work that you do. And there are ways that we can make that happen for you. And it's pretty painless, you know, it's pretty painless. We can onboard the team inside of an hour and you're off to the races. Now you're going to be able to focus on other fun and enjoyable things. So that's kind of the discussion path that we go down. It's like, man, income verification doesn't have to be like digging a ditch that you fill in and dig again. It should be more like ordering a pizza. That is the gratification. You call a large pepperoni. Next thing you have to do is answer the doorbell and get your pizza. Income verification can be the same way. You can set it aside. It's set it and forget it, right? Click to verify, send out an invite, go about your daily activities. In comes a report, then you're positioned to make a decision. So helping them understand that there's this massive disruption flow that literally just gets flushed. It's gone.
So like from a force ranking perspective, like do you find that your buyers buy on a cost savings basis or on a risk mitigation basis?
Well, that's part of the discovery cycle, is finding out how your buyer ticks.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can be coming to the table from either side.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a mix, right? So what's the right
or
story?
maybe faster revenue, right? I guess faster revenue the other one, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. What's the decision path that resonates with your buyer?
Right.
So our discovery process is finding out what are their pressure points, what are their pain points. Is it budget based? Is it high turnover in the seats next to them? If I'm a community manager and I can't keep somebody on the front line, that's because they hate trying to verify income because it's a royal pain in the you know what. That's the highest turnover seat in the house. Why not give them better tools so they're more likely to stay? Because we all know how much it costs to turn over headcount. Super expensive. So it's finding out, like, what are the things that they're suffering with that derive from the cycle, the traditional cycle of violence around verifying income.
Sure.
And how do we take the violence out of it and make the cycle spin faster, roll down the street faster, so they can focus on higher value activities like occupant retention.
So then getting, like, for the audience that's listening, for like tactical kind of experience share on the questions to determine if they're looking for faster revenue, like better, faster, or cheaper, right? Or risk or cost. How do you dig in on that? Like, what's the double click there?
Sure. Right. Yeah. So, a question is, everyone wants to know, it's like, man, this is amazing. It's really elegant. And how much does it cost? Right. And so when you get into the cost conversation, now you really pull out the tools around the economic value, right? You talk about 50% efficiency gain. You talk about reducing bad debt from 600K to 30K. Talk about 0% delinquencies. And it's becomes easy to understand and interpret on the buyer side that, there really is something here that is beneficial to the company above and beyond just the process improvement.
Right.
How do you convey those layers of value that aren't just the thing on the surface? Oh, you verify income. Okay, I get it. Yeah, no more bad pay stubs. We find
this similar experience in that, like, when we talk to folks that are looking for just simply a process improvement, they're more slow to buy.
Yeah.
And those that are really suffering from, like, our side, like, and it's taken us a lot of time. And again, to your point, that it's not it's not obvious for everybody. It's not a straight pitch for everybody. Like, is it a cost mitigation, or is it a risk mitigation, a cost, lowering or risk mitigation? Because like often we find that people are trying to mitigate talent, and the absence of talent creates more of a burning platform than the ability to save costs. Because like if I'm going to need to grow from, let's say, like, and I also find that like the smaller operators or PMCs, if they're looking to go from like 20,000 to 40,000, they're going to have a doubling effect, and so they've got some real blockers in their way that are going to prevent them from being able to double.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in 100,000, 200,000, that's like moving the earth, right?
Yeah.
So like that's acquisitions. Whereas if you're looking at organically double, there's certain things you got to figure out in your own way.
Right.
And so
systematizing process, right? I mean, they always say for the franchisor, the franchisee, it's the third location that'll kill you. If you don't have your systems in place and you try to open that third store, you're done.
Mm-hmm.
There's only 24 hours a day. You can't work 12 hours a day at 3 locations.
That's right. Yeah. Good systems. So like what we find is that like like there's an obvious cost of, like, there's so many times we hear that's a no-brainer. This is a no-brainer, right? And then the but comes, right? So what buts do you get?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the bet for us is, man, we're so focused on this other initiative right now that we can't look at this until next quarter.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a no right now. It's not a no for good. And that's okay. So the key way to work with that is to recognize and acknowledge that can be the truth inside of your target accounts. But you got to build your pipeline, fill your pipeline accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Simple as that. So yeah, you got to meet the customer where they are, right? How are you making their life easier? If they can't look at this until next quarter, that's great. Then let's dig in next quarter. But I want to make sure I'm on your calendar before I get off this call, right? Yeah. So let's book 100%. The meeting now instead of me reaching out in a quarter and then trying to book the meeting, which takes another quarter to get on your calendar.
That's right.
Yeah. So then it's it's the basic mechanisms, the block and tackle of sales, and making sure that our team is executing against those basic block and tackle steps.
Where did you get into where did you first start getting exposed to the kind of the rhythm of sales, the cadence of sales?
I had a paper out when I was 11 years old. I've been an entrepreneur ever since.
That was actually my first experience of bad debt.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, man, I've been selling ever since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cadence of it is it's not as natural as it should be. Like staying on cadence for sales, like especially top of funnel activities, it can be distracting. Like it's easy to be distracted by it, and it's interesting when you start trying to do batches for certain things. It really is about consistently pursuing the same target at the same time. Like one thing that we've learned over and over and over again is the bowling pin approach. It really rings true. And if you're familiar with that, or the audience is like, it's that you have to have pursuing multiple prospects that look very, very similar to one another. And in the best case scenario, they know one another, and start knocking the energy that goes into knocking that first pin down can do a lot of the work to knocking down the subsequent pins. Yeah. But the temptation in property management is to get fragmented because everybody is everywhere. Right. Yeah. And so to your point about the conferences, what I find also very interesting is that while you may be focusing in Dallas or Seattle or a certain regional market, but then you go to these conferences and everybody seems to know each other, right? Are you heading to NMHC next week?
Some of the team will be there. I will not be there for this one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and so right now, like I'm sure, like a lot of people, we're lining up our conference schedule for the year, and it's just like, Jesus, it seems like there's one every single week. Right.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, it's easy to get distracted and chase the shiny metal object, right? You have to put a harness on your internal lab tendencies and not chase every squirrel,
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So you take a look at like folks that either that you're bringing on or people you mentored entrepreneurs for years. So when you're talking about getting to hell yes, what's the one piece of advice you typically offer to folks that are looking for some help?
Well, I think it's a function of the role. Like if somebody's thinking about starting a company, I try to talk them out of it. I'm just kidding. Yeah. But, if you bring somebody on in the sales environment, it's really trying to understand, what are their pressure points, what are their pain points, and are they hardwired to have what I call consistent persistence.
Mm-hmm.
Are they hardwired to be able to deliver a consistent persistence that yields success? I mean, look at the most successful salespeople. They have a short-term thinking problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're a soccer fan or football fan, the rest of the world calls it the goal scorers, the strikers on the team, shot after shot after shot, right? One out of every 5, 1 out of 8, maybe goes on target, goes in. They have to forget about the last attempt right away. If they linger on that last attempt, the next attempt's never coming.
Right.
So the best sales execs have that same mentality where, okay, I didn't get this one, and go get the next one.
Yeah.
And the next one, the next one, the next one, next one, right? You got to be, to your bowling pin analogy, you got to be there trying to push more pins over all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. It's like this endless loop of pins all the way down the lane to extend that.
But I find it easier to adopt the mentality that you're talking about when I've come to accept that it's not up to me to convince them. It's up to them to be ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like the no's aren't personal. They're just not, typically it's either bad timing and there's always something to improve on, right? There's always a call to review, and I talked too much, or I didn't, double click on this. But ultimately, people, especially for novel ideas, they really need to be looking for a problem to solve. And if you're unable to articulate or double click on that problem, then you're going to kind of have a lot of deals that go out the side door.
Yeah.
And that's that's very hard to resist as a founder, entrepreneur, CEO, right?
Yeah. It's about repetition. For us, it's at bats.
Mm-hmm.
If, going back earlier in our conversation, talk about how quickly we can onboard new accounts. Quit spending the time on someone who might onboard in 6 months. Go find someone who's going to onboard in this call.
Yeah.
Right. You can come back to the 6-monther. That's okay.
Yeah.
Let it lay fallow and ping them on their schedule, but you got to get more of the more at bats to hit it out of the park. Here's maybe a fun story from a number of years past. One of my board members in a past company was on the board at a little company you might have heard of that was started here in Seattle called Costco. And
yeah.
Yeah. Run into that one before? Yeah. Don't go.
Yeah.
That place. One of the founders of that company started his career as a salesperson in insurance sales. And he was calling on accounts. And when he came the first day on this new job, his supervisor, owner of the company, said, Guillermo, listen, this is how it works here. You're on a 100-point plan every day, 100 points.
Yeah.
And you can get your points either 100 calls, or each of those is worth a point.
Yeah.
25 points for a booked meeting. I'm sorry, 10 points for a booked meeting, 25 points for a held meeting. And your last day is the first day you don't get 100 points.
There you go.
The network this fellow built, Mr. Brotman built, that led him to start Costco was all the people he was calling on, earning his 100 points a day.
Wow.
He identified the commonality that all these small business owners he was calling on to sell general liability insurance policies to, they're all struggling. He's listening and learning about their pain points. Germinated this idea that they all have this common thread. They all need napkins for their restaurants. Where are they going to get their napkins? Well, they're buying them at the grocery. Where are they getting their cups for their restaurant? Buying them at the grocery. It's like,
right.
So, there can be side benefits coming from the discipline of exercising consistent persistence.
Yeah. Well, it's the go out and get, the win is go get 100 no's. And I've never met anybody who's got 100 no's in a row.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Very cool. So how, people want to get a hold of you. How should they get a hold of you?
Mark@payscore.com. Pretty simple.
Nice. Very simple. All right.
Yeah.
And then who should we talk to next?
Oh man. A couple of guys that occur to me. You could talk to my buddy Ed Carey at Audience Town. He's doing some cool stuff in this space. If you want to get outside of this space, Aaron Ambruski at a company called Hest. They're bringing more comfortable sleeping to outdoor enthusiasts. We got a
Very
major
cool.
improvement to the outdoor mattress and related ancillary sleeping-based products. Pretty cool story about how he's built that company.
It's always interesting to hear people who are bringing new products into existing markets because they do have to differentiate. Like I had a good chat with Todd Thorpe on challenger brands, right? And the go-to-market for a challenger brand is different than a go-to-market on an existing category, right? And it's fun to hear how that goes. Well,
Yeah.
that's very cool. I'll reach out to those guys independently and lean on you for an intro.
Sure.
To everyone listening, so listen to the podcast. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify. Mark, really appreciate your time today. I think the power of persistence message that you're ringing through is something that everyone's got to feel these days, even on a leasing side, right? Even on, I mean, the doors, we're not taking orders anymore, right? It is about being a product that is worthwhile to be attractive. Then ultimately using PayScore to make sure you don't have the back end, right?
Exactly.
Outstanding. Thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thanks everyone listening in, and look forward to us. We've got another call with Conrad from Elevate OS, and this week. I think we've got another one later on in the week, but we'll catch up with that one. Take care, everyone.